What's up, y'all? This is Nina Perez, and this is Straight Talk, No Sugar Added. And you know, I go around this freaking amazing planet of ours, finding the best humans I can find to come on here to grow, challenge, and transform your thinking. Because you know what? I think we're just getting bombarded with too much negativity in the world as it is. So I'm trying to only bring you things that are really going to transform the way you think in a good way, in a way that you can grow and really expand who you are as a human. Make sure that you like, share, subscribe, all that great stuff, because I do like to reach more and more people in the audience so that we can keep inspiring and growing this thing. I have somebody so really freaking cool for you today. Her name is Audrey, and she's a multifaceted artist. She wears many hats, right? She's a jewelry maker, designer, storyteller. She's a creative force behind my Dancing Dragonfly, and it's like a sanctuary of handmade jewelry that goes beyond aesthetics. And I love this. As me and her spoke a few weeks ago, and I couldn't wait to have her on. She crafts these amazing designs, right, with pieces of different media, and each design is more than just an accessory, right? This is what I love the most, and these creations serve as a way for a keepsake of capturing the essence of somebody's weather journey. And I can't wait to get into it. So let's just get into it. Miss Audrey, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm great, Nina. Thank you. And thanks so much for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm excited you're here. We had such a great conversation a few weeks ago, and I couldn't wait for the podcast. So I like to start this show off by letting people know a little bit more about you. So I always ask that little tiny question: Who are you? Who are you, Audrey? Who are you? Tell
Well, probably depends who you ask on any given day, but
Right.
normally I would say that I am a person I call myself a seniorpreneur. I started my
Love
business a
it.
year ago as a obvious senior, and I am so excited to be developing a new aspect of my life. I have
Love
worked
that.
in many fields. I've worked in human resources. I've worked in um, social services most recently before I retired officially from the rat race. And
Hmm.
now I get to create jewelry that people love that tells stories. So, for
Love it.
instance, I had a lot to overcome in my life. I lost my mom when I was 10 years old, and
Yeah.
my dad remarried less than a year later, and we were legally adopted by this woman, and she was a narcissist and a horrible human being, and I was in a downward spiral for years. I even,
Mm.
at the
Mm.
age of 12, I remember standing in a kitchen with a knife, thinking maybe I would just slit my wrists and hoping someone would come in and stop me. I mean, I was that in that much pain. And
Right.
over the years, it didn't get much better. So at one point, I decided, you know what? Being a victim sucks. I didn't want to do that anymore. And I didn't like who I was as a victim. So I decided
Mm.
to make a deliberate choice to be a victor rather than a victim.
Love it.
And I chose to deal with people differently. I worked with her differently and gave her a much lesser starring role in my life. And have created a piece of jewelry for myself actually that tells a story. Because people sometimes ask that, like, how does jewelry tell a story? Well, sure, if you've ever done like the troll beads or if you've ever had a charm bracelet, that's a piece of jewelry that
Yeah.
tells a story.
Yeah, yeah, good point. I love that you're saying that, because that's very true. You're right. I think the first reaction is, well, how does Julie tell a story? But you're absolutely right. I remember having those little charm bracelets, especially when I was going into cooking and being a chef, and I had all the little chef stuff on it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Because it
sure.
told the story. I definitely see where that can tell a story, but I would like to backtrack a little bit if that's okay
Sure.
with you. I always like to dig into people and what they've done and overcome, right? Because it's one thing to say that you have become a victor from being a victim. I as well. So that's where we connected when we spoke.
Mhm.
But I want to know when and how, right? Because I think that's where some of us that are listening may be a little stuck, right? So what was it? When was it? Was it in your 20s? Was it in your teens? Like, when was it that you looked at this and said, this sucks and I need to change it? Because you went from wanting to cut your wrist, right, to overcoming this. And that is so important. I want to know that piece. Can you share that with us?
Absolutely. I started looking into counseling when I was in my 20s, and I was frustrated with it because everybody seemed to want to be this one style of analyst where like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
let's go back to when Moby Dick was a sardine and let's talk about, what life was like for you in utero and stuff like that. And I'm like, I don't need that. I know
In
what's wrong
utero?
with my
Okay.
life. Yeah. I know I know what I need to I know where I'd like to go. I don't know how to get there. So what I
Right.
need truly are tools to cope and to learn how to deal with this. And it took me a lot of different counselors, but I finally found a couple who were amazing. And the first one that really resonated with me was a gentleman named Mitch, I'm sorry. And what he did was he challenged me to take the tape in my head, the one that told me I wasn't good enough, that I was too stupid, I was too slow, I was not, good enough, I was not enough in general, and to replace it with a different tape. So that was
Mm-hmm.
kind of a cool concept for me, and we actually recorded me on tape saying, "I'm a good person who sometimes makes mistakes."
Right.
Wow, that was freeing
Right.
for me. Not
Yeah.
that I had to go in this whole spiral of, "Well, you're not good enough, and you're dumb, you're slow, you process things differently than a lot
Mm.
of people, blah, 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 blah." And this was just like, "Yeah, I'm a good person, I sometimes make a mistake. How cool is that?" And
Yeah.
I learned
Yeah.
from them. That's even cooler. So, wow, look at this bad thing that turned into a good thing. And
Right.
he really is the one who helped me flip that switch.
That's amazing. And I love that you said, I was disappointed at first, but I kept searching. I think that's where most people, maybe fail a little bit is because they'll try one or two and then they're like, forget it, it doesn't work. But that's not true. I mean, I had several counselors as well, right, to try to help me cope with the trauma. I'll tell you that I did cope with a lot of it, had some good, good counselors, but the best part for me came when I discovered neurolinguistic programming and switching things like what you're talking about, and really diving into personal development and all of that. Because yeah, the trauma is there. You do have to deal with the trauma. You can't just ignore it. It is there. It will stop you, because it's like you said, it's already programs. Those are already programs, and we got to change the programming. So when you started, and by the way, I think we dated ourselves because I totally know what a tape is. But those of you who are listening and don't know what a tape is, okay, we used to use tapes, okay. But so when you had that tape recorded, was that a weird thing at first, and then you just kept playing the tape to reprogram yourself, or tell me about that. Tell me about that piece of it.
Well, it was strange at first because I'm one of those weird people. I don't like looking at myself. I don't like pictures. I don't like listening to myself, all of
Mm-hmm.
that. So he did a cassette tape for me, with a little one, not an 8 track, not quite that old, but pretty old. Anyway,
That's
but
funny.
I took it home and put it in my car, and I would listen to this as I was driving
Good,
to
good,
and from work. And it was sort of
good.
then became like a mantra. So I didn't have to listen to it at a certain point unless I was having a really bad day. But I was able to, instead of beating myself up, I was able to start having this positive self-talk rather
Mm-hmm,
than
mm-hmm.
negative self-talk. And
Right.
one of the things that really resonated with me was he also said to me, if you had a friend who came to you who was really troubled and upset, dealing with the sorts of things that you dealt with, would you tell them they were too slow and stupid and dumb and an
Right.
idiot for making a mistake? Or what would you tell them? And I said, well, of course not. I would never say that to a
Right.
friend. I would say, well, it's good that you realized you made a mistake. And what's your takeaway? What did you learn from this? What would you do to maybe prevent making this mistake again in the future? And good for you. And he's like, well, why don't you do that for you? And I'm like, oh, what a concept.
What a concept. And in a real, and that's real though. That's very, very real. I mean, I've always been one of those people who push people, inspire them. I see gifts in people. It's just such a blessing to have that as a gift. But I never saw that in me. I saw it in others. And so I understand what he's saying, and it's true. We're not very kind to ourselves, right?
No.
And we're not kind to ourselves because we were programmed not to be kind to ourselves. Because we are all, what is it, from the age from birth to like 7 years old, all we're doing is downloading programs. We don't have that, conscious mind yet where we can decipher, oh, my mother is a narcissist. Hold on a second. You know what I'm saying? Let me not take everything. Of course you're not, because your brain is still developing. You don't have any idea, right? You just know that I'm not good enough. She hates me, or whatever those tapes that were playing in your head from what you were experiencing, right? So let me ask you this: when you started to get into this personal development, was she still alive? And if she
Yes.
was, how did you deal with that? How did you manage that?
Well, I had read this brilliant book called Toxic Parents, and it really helped me. I wrote an anger letter because of this book, and it really talked about how sometimes parents come from good, well-meaning places, and sometimes parents come from places where they were raised in a funky way, and you have like a choice. You either end up perpetuating what you grew up with, or you can do it
Mhm.
differently.
Right.
And so that was kind of really an eye opener for me. But I did ask her at one point, and this is like after decades of this, I invited her to
Mhm.
do counseling with me. And I knew her well enough to know that if we had gone to my counselor, this amazing Mitch, who did great things for me, that anything he said she would discount because he was my counselor.
Right,
So I
right.
very, very, very bravely, for me, went to her counselor with her.
Okay. Okay.
And we had a
That was
session
big of
there,
you.
and I thought so too. I was scared to death. And her
Yeah.
counselor at one point was questioning her about something, and she said, Where's all this vitriol coming from towards your daughter? What
Mhm.
is happening?" And I got the call the day after that saying, "Counseling really isn't working, so we might as well just go our separate ways." But I wanted
Yeah.
to do that, but I wanted it to be her decision because there was no way I
Yeah.
was letting her be a victim.
Yeah. Good for you. And it's also, for those who are listening, and sometimes it's okay to walk away. And it's when you are dealing with a person who is a narcissist, that is extremely hard. It is very, very difficult to deal with a narcissist, especially when they are your parent or your child, or someone you really, really love. Narcissism is a really tough thing. So I'm really glad that you did that, though, because it set you free, didn't it? It's almost like, I've done my part. I went beyond the victimhood. I actually stepped forward to try to make amends, and I've done I'm good. I've done my part. And that feels good. At least it settles something. Did you feel that way?
I did feel good, and for somebody who doesn't really understand what it's like to deal with a narcissist, I'll give you a real quick phone call
Yeah.
conversation that happened at the very beginning of the end. I called her one day. I said, "Hi, Mom, how are you?" "Fine." "Ooh, that doesn't sound like you're fine. What's wrong?" "You didn't call to ask me about how my doctor's appointment was this week." "I didn't know you had a doctor's appointment this week,
Right.
Mom. You never told me." "Well, you should
Right.
have asked." When I
Okay.
say to you, "How are you and what's new and what's happening in your life?" That's your time to tell me these things. I don't
Right.
know what laundry list I'm supposed to ask questions off of. So
Right.
it's like you can never win.
Yeah.
And decided it wasn't really worth it to try anymore. Any other
Right.
family, I felt I would have been a great daughter. I would have been really valued and appreciated. I'm a hard worker. I've really turned my life around in so many ways and did right by my kids and did all these things that any other parent would have been so proud of. And she just couldn't. So I
Yeah.
finally realized one day it was her problem, not mine.
Right.
And as my counselor said, this will not be over until one of you dies.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Because some
that
people
really
just
was the
can't
gist of it.
change. Yeah. Yeah. It must have been tough for you too, because when you're 10, your mom that passed away. It's not like you didn't know her, right? Well, so that
Right.
must have been a really hard transition for you as well, having someone else step in and act like mom when you just lost your mom.
Well, it was even worse than that in a way. I have an older sister and a younger sister. My older sister is 3 years older than I am. So we really knew my mom. I mean, she taught us
Yeah.
how to embroider. She was very creative. We did fun stuff with her in the summer. She taught us both her love of reading and music and things like that. But when my dad remarried, little sister, 6 years younger, but when my dad remarried, it was like they wanted to erase my mom's
Yeah.
family completely. So
Oh,
not
that's
only did
tough.
we lose our mom, we lost our maternal grandmother, we lost our maternal aunt,
Oh,
we lost our
wow.
maternal cousins, and it hurt. It really,
Oh,
really
heck
hurt.
yeah. Heck yeah, that hurts. Heck yeah, that hurts. And I don't think, I think parents sometimes they think that they know best, right? So they kind of just make decisions without realizing the pain, or they don't even, I don't know, I can't speak for your father or anything, but I know that me growing up, they never asked me how I felt about things. They never asked me, how do I feel about moving to a new school, or leaving my friends, or my feelings were not taken into account ever. And maybe that's what makes you such a great mom, though, right? I think that's what made me a great mom, is like, going through all of those hard times makes you like aware, if you want to be aware. It um makes you look beyond your circumstances and say, I'm not going to be that. I'm going to be something better. Do you feel that way?
I do, and it's interesting you say that because, I like you said, we were kind of raised, although you I'm sure you're much younger than I am, but it was the suck it up buttercup,
Yeah.
deal
Yep.
where this is what's happening and you're just going to deal with it. And
Mhm.
as I turned, got older and became a mom myself, I wanted my daughters to do better. I wanted them to know better and I wanted them
Yeah.
to have better. So what I did for them was I empowered them to handle things. I didn't step in and just fix things, but we
Yep.
talked
Me too.
about it. And I
Mhm.
remember one day I said to my daughter, she was telling me this story, somebody really said something hurtful to her, and she was very upset, and I looked at her and I listened, and I said, "That sounds really horrible." I said, "But I do have to ask you something." And she's like, "What?" And I said, "What did you say to her that caused her to ask you that? Because that isn't something somebody would just say out of the blue." And she's like, "Oh, how did you know?" So I would tease her, page 384 in the mom's handbook.
Right.
And they actually, my
Right.
kids grew up thinking there was a handbook,
It was a handbook.
um,
I wish. I
but
wish.
I wanted her to be empowered. I wanted her to call
Yeah,
people
that's
out. I
good.
wanted her to question. And I think they both ended up being very strong women because of that.
Yeah.
I didn't
Yeah.
want them to have that voice like I did. Well, I know you better than you know yourself. And then you question yourself and second guess yourself all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So then take us to where you started, because I know you had your whole career. You did, you shared with us in the beginning how you had your whole professional career, but why jewelry? What was there? Because it's kind of cool. I have to just say this because you just said my mom taught us, embroidery, I think you said, and
Yes.
music is so she was very artsy herself, right?
Yes,
It's
she
um
was.
it's pretty amazing that then you then picked up similar traits to create. So tell me a little bit about what you do now, how you got into that. I would love to know more.
Okay, well, it's kind of a weird story. My older sister and I happened to be in downtown Chicago waiting to meet my grandfather for lunch. And we were in a building in downtown and we were walking around and I just happened to see a bead store. So I'm like, oh, this is cool. Let's go in and see what it is. So we walked in and I'm like, this is fun. Look at all these cool beads. And I asked them, how do you make earrings? So they told me. And so I bought some stuff, with my babysitting money, and I brought it
Right.
home and I started making jewelry out of everything. And it became a family joke, hide your salt and pepper shaker because if there's two of something, she's going to make earrings out of it.
That's awesome.
And then I went off to college and I got busy with that and I didn't do jewelry for a number of years. And then fast forward, I was working at a staffing agency as a recruiter and I went to a job expo and this bead store, this wonderful bead store. Shout out to Isla's Originals in Evanston, was there, and they had this gorgeous pearl necklace and said, drop your business card to win this necklace. And I knew I wasn't going to win, just had a feeling. So I did the next best thing, and I said, hey, do you guys offer classes? And he said, yeah. I said, cool. So I started taking classes at Isla's,
Oh,
and she
nice.
said, your workmanship is saleable. You're, very precise. You're very, I like what you do. And I said, very cool. She was also a former HR person. A lot of former HR people ended up in beating for some reason. Um, I don't know why, but it started me beating again. And I've taught some classes and some other things around it. And then I kind of branched out from there and learned metal smithing and metal clay and polymer
Oh,
clay and all
cool.
kinds of other stuff. So it's definitely a family gift. The music was a gift as well. I played piano for many, many years, and my older sister actually writes and composes and plays music. She's a
Oh, nice.
clarinetist. So we stuck with the creativity gene, I guess.
Yeah. Mom really instilled that in you, which is so beautiful. So tell me about why the jewelry, why is it telling a story? Like, what is that about? How did that even start? Right? Because you were making earrings out of hide everything, right? Even the salt and pepper
Yes.
shakers. So how did
Yeah.
it
Wine
become
corks
something
too.
that
Yes.
yeah.
Um,
How did it start to be more intentional? Because it sounds like your jewelry has taken a turn to being very intentional now.
well, it was interesting. I knew at a point I was going to have to divorce my girl's dad. And uh, we counseled for a lot of years. We did everything we could, but we just couldn't make it work. So it was an amicable parting. And one of the things I figured was, I need to make some changes. So I needed to get a different job. I had been doing in-home childcare. And
Mm.
my older daughter, who was 7 at the time, made me a piece. I don't know if you remember shrink plastic, but
Oh
shrink
yeah.
plastic was a big deal. And she made me a
Yeah.
pin. Well, she said, "Mommy, would you wear this pin for good luck to your job interviews?" And I said, "Sure." So I went and wore that like all the job interviews. And every time I wore it, somebody commented. And they said, "Wow, what a cool pen." I was like, "Thank you. My 7-year-old daughter made this for me. She wanted me to have good luck while I was having interviews." And the funny
That's
thing
funny.
was, I got 7 offers within 24 hours, i-
Wow.
including one place I hadn't heard from for 3 months. Everyone called me. The one I really wanted did not, so I called them and I said, "I just wondered where you are in the process. Really interested in your position, but I just received 6 offers overnight," and they're like, "Don't accept anything till we get back to you today." And they called me and made me the offer. So, that's when I realized that pin had just such a sweet story attached to it.
Yeah.
Everybody responded like, "Oh, how cool that your daughter loves you so much that she wanted to make you this piece that you wore to your interviews," things
I
like that.
love
And that's
that.
when I realized you don't need a charm bracelet to tell a story. You can wear a piece that is a necklace that maybe is made of resin, and maybe it has a piece of your late dog's fur in it, and maybe it's got a special flower that you picked
Oh.
on your first date, and maybe it has something else. So you can tell stories a gazillion different ways. We had for one at one point we had a leather shop in Sanibel Island, my husband and I, and we had a lady call, and it was the coolest thing. She said, "I really would like to see if you can help me with something." And I said, "Tell me what you need." And she said, "Okay, I'll be honest with you. I'm severely visually impaired, legally blind." She said, "But my happy place is the ocean. I love the beach. I love the ocean. And what I'd really love is if you could come up with a piece for me that would make me think of the ocean." And
Oh
I said,
man.
"Okay, let me tell you this." At that time, I didn't know half the things that I know now. I said, "But I work a lot with a glass artist. She sells some of her stuff in our shop." I said, "Why don't you let me talk to her, share this with her, and let's see if she and I can work with you to collaborate on a design." So she designed this piece for this woman with me, and we made sure it was appropriate colors because even though she was visually impaired, we wanted her to feel proud that other people would comment on it. So we
Right.
did it she kind of designed this piece of glass. It almost looked like a Ruffles potato chip. So it
Mhm.
had like dips and waves in it. And then there was this flatter, sandier part with a little bit of texture. So it was teal and sand. And then
Oh,
I
wow.
strung it on leather for her, and I added a charm of a sea turtle and a seahorse and a shell. And she loved it. She
Yeah.
absolutely loved it. So we were able to tell her story, which was very personal to her,
Mhm, mhm,
and she could wear
mhm.
it as a talisman. And so that's what
It's so
really got me
beautiful.
into telling stories through jewelry. Anybody can do it on a charm bracelet. It's easy and it's fun. And I've made those too. I actually made the bracelet from scratch and told a love story for our dog walker to his wife for their anniversary. That
I
was really
love
cool.
it. I love
So there's
it, and I love that. You're connecting with people at a deeper level, and it's so beautiful. Like, now when she touches her necklace, she feels the turtle, she feels the shell, she feels the waves, she feels the sand, and although she can't visually see it, she definitely can see it in her mind, which is so beautiful.
it
Yeah,
brings her to her happy place.
yeah,
And what
yeah.
an
That's
honor to
very
be brought
deep.
into that, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that's very deep, right? We have something in NLP called anchoring, and that's what that reminds me of, being anchored to something. It's like when you hear a song and it takes you right back to that moment, or you eat that dish that is nostalgic. As soon as you eat it, you're like, "Oh my gosh, I remember when I ate this when," right? That's what your
Mhm.
jewelry is doing. It's taking people like an anchored back to that moment, that place, that time. I love that. And I love that you said the part about the dog hair and in the resin and all of that, because that would be really powerful for people who love their pets like I do. I love my babies, and I have a puppy right now, or he's not a puppy, he's 14, but he has congestive heart failure, and I find myself crying every night, and my husband's like, "Babe, he's still here." I'm like, "I know, but I know it's coming," and I'm just so heartbroken. But something like that would be so special, would be so special. So tell me a little bit about what you're doing now. Are you still teaching classes? Do you have a website where you do this? Are you doing personalized pieces? Like, to tell me about your business, what you're doing.
Okay, well, the business model is interesting to me. There's a lot of jewelers out there and they make really pretty things. And I was trying to think, like, what can I do that would be maybe a little bit different? And so I'm not just like everybody else.
Right.
And I thought about it and then I really realized that all the jewelry that I buy for myself, it usually resonates with me in some way. There's something about it that speaks to me. It might remind me of something or not. So I can do anything. Like, for instance, I made a piece of jewelry out of grandma's old china because I didn't want the old china. I have my own china that my daughters don't want. But
Right.
how fun to have a piece of my grandma's history to wear around my neck. I
That's
also took
interesting.
handkerchiefs of hers and I made a bracelet out of it. So I wear grandma's handkerchiefs and I wear her necklace if I want.
That's
Um,
so cool.
but some of the stories are self-told. I mean, I call them short stories on my website. So I made, for instance, there's a necklace. It's not on my site yet, it's coming, but it's locks and keys and hearts and some crystals. And it just says, the key to success is love. Love yourself, love
Right.
others, love what you
Right.
do.
Yeah.
Success.
Yeah.
And so that to me is a short story.
Right.
And who would wanna wear that? Well, maybe you're looking for a new job, or maybe you're starting a new job, and you just wanna feel that little extra bit empowered. Jewelry can do that for you.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
piece I made about my own story is silver on silver on silver just melted, that showed that you can be diminished so many times, but you can come back as something stronger and more beautiful.
I love it.
And when I traveled recently to Boston to visit my sister, I'm not a great flyer. I'm okay, but I get a little nervous on takeoff and landing. I held on to my necklace with everything I had on takeoff, and then I'm like, "Okay, we're up in the air," and I let go, and it was fine. Did the same thing when we landed. It's just nice to
Right.
have something that grounds you that way. And I recently lost a fur baby about 2 months ago, and right now
Mhm.
I'm working on a memorial piece for her because she was special. She was a really special girl. and a very
Yeah.
joyful dog, and so I'm working on different elements of that would
That's
just brings me
awesome.
comfort when I think of her. So they
Yeah.
can be memorial, they can be celebratory of a new baby, it can be you survived abuse and turned into a badass woman.
Right.
Cool.
Right.
Celebrate you. Celebrate all you've accomplished because
Right.
we do so much, we accomplish so much, and we are not as generous about saying, "Wow, that was great," to yourself
Yeah.
as you are
Right.
to everybody else but, it's okay to sometimes say, "Wow, that was pretty cool. I'm amazing. Look at
Yeah.
what I overcame a lot." And my sister and I were talking about it when I was with her last week, and we are both like, we both ended up being pretty cool people, very caring, very
I love
interested
that.
in giving back, very interested in communicating and all of that. And look what we came from. And look at how we turned
Right.
out. How
Right. How
cool is
beautiful is
that?
that? That is so cool. And it's really cool because, like you said, even like a woman who's a survivor, if she's carrying a piece that represents that, when somebody asks her, she is constantly reminded that she is a survivor, that she's a badass. Right. And so, like, that's what resonated with me. I'm a survivor of domestic violence, right, many years ago. But like something like that would have really empowered me. Like for me to know, somebody says, "Oh, I like your bracelet." Yeah, that's my Wonder Woman bracelet because I'm a badass. You know what I mean? Like stuff like that, which is so cool. I
Mhm.
really love what you're doing.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I love what you're doing, and I love the way you're connecting
Thank you.
people to what's special to them. And I thank you for sharing your story as well, Audrey, because one of the things I love about my audience is that, they're always like emailing me or DMing me or whatever just to tell me how something has touched them. And I know that this is going to touch them. So I thank you for that. I thank you for sharing that story because people can see that. I love that you said you started off with saying I'm a seniorpreneur, right? And that means it doesn't matter the age, doesn't matter who you are, it doesn't matter, guys. You guys can start anything you want, whenever you want, however you want. Just do it, and do it out of love. Just do it because you want to do it. So Audrey, before I let you go, I know that people are probably like, okay, but how do we get our jewelry pieces made? So give me your website, how people can contact you, like things like that, so people can really connect with what you're doing.
Great, thank you. I have a Shopify store, and you can find me by going to https colon slash slash I'm
Uh-huh.
sorry, mydancingdragonfly.com. Don't forget the
Say it
my.
again.
So it's mydancingdragonfly.com.
My dancing
https
dragonfly.
mydancingfly.com.
Okay. MyDancingDragonfly.com. The reason I asked you to repeat is because it kind of broke up a little bit. I want to make sure they got it. MyDancingDragonfly.com is where you can go and see Audrey's pieces and also connect with her because, she may be able to really do something special with you and for you. So Audrey, thank you for being here and sharing your story and sharing, your amazing stories of the people who have made these pieces. I really, really am grateful for you and your time. And I am so glad we met. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you, Nina. I'm glad we met as well, and thank you again so much for having me.
I'm glad. I'm glad. Guys, see, I told you, best humans on the planet, right? Right here on Straight Talk, No Sugar Added. I'm going to make sure to link Audrey's information below and her website and everything because you know what? Just like me, I have a little fur baby and I may want to reach out to Audrey to do something special for me as well. My little fur baby might be gone in maybe a few months or a year. I don't know. But either way, I'm going to enjoy every moment I can with him. But then to also be able to know that I can, carry a little piece of him with me wherever I go because he means so much to me. He means so much to me. But thank you guys for being here. I love you so much. This is Neena Perez. This is Straight Talk, No Sugar Added. Until next time.